Hello, and thank you for listening to Texas History for Kids. I'm your host, Michelle Gallegos, an educator, writer, history nerd, and novice investigator. Each week on the show, we will learn about interesting parts of Texas history, from battles and historical figures to the odd and enchanted. Welcome back to Texas History for Kids, and I'm your host, Michelle Gallegos. We're changing things up here at Texas History for Kids. I've gotten quite a few emails with questions and suggestions from you guys. So I've asked my new co-host and daughter, Zoe, to help me with the new section of the show. And we're calling it The Big Question.
Hey, Mom, would you rather sail across a stormy ocean on an old wooden ship for months, or live in a brand new town with no stores, no phones, and no electricity?
Whoa, that's tough. So, do I have to deal with pirates on the ship?
Maybe. You might spot a flag or two.
Okay. I think I'd pick the ship because at least when you finally get to land, you're done. That's it. Living with no electricity forever? No way. What about you?
Honestly, I think I'd go with living in a new town. I'd rather build something from scratch than be stuck on a smelly ship.
Oh, good point. So what about you listening at home? What would you choose? A dangerous sea journey or life in the wild with no modern stuff? Think about it, because today's story is about people who had to do both. Have you ever heard of a group of people who sailed across a dangerous ocean, braved pirates, sickness, and storms, all to build a brand new life in a strange and wild land? This is the story of 16 brave families from a very tiny group of islands in the Atlantic Ocean who left everything behind in 1731 to come to a place called San Antonio de Béxar. Today we're taking you back in time, almost 300 years ago, to uncover a story of courage, survival, and the birth of something entirely new. This isn't just a history lesson, guys. It's an epic adventure. So let's dive in. It's the early 1700s and Spain has a big problem. Imagine you're a king and you've got this huge piece of land called New Spain, which basically is most of Mexico and parts of what is now the United States. But guess what? Another powerful country, France, is also eyeing that same land, especially a place we now call Texas. France has already claimed nearby Louisiana, and they wanted more. If Spain didn't act fast, France would swoop in and take Texas. So, what did Spain do? Well, they looked at a tiny set of islands off the coast of Africa called the Canary Islands that were, ironically, not owned by Africa. Instead, Spain controlled them. So, Spain came up with a bold plan. Their plan was send settlers, those of brave families, from 8 tiny islands across the ocean to hold Texas for Spain. So their plan is born. El Marqués de San Miguel de Aguayo, a Spanish nobleman, had the idea to bring 400 families to Texas. Half of them would come from places like Galicia, Havana, and yes, the Canary Islands. But why these islanders? Well, they were tough. They were used to farming in hard conditions. And most of all, they were loyal to Spain. In 1729, King Felipe V gave the green light. Letters went out to the Canary Islands, calling families to join this dangerous but very important mission. Now let's talk about this journey real quick. No planes, no cars, no comfy cruise ships. These families would have to sail across the wild Atlantic Ocean, stop in Cuba, head to Veracruz, and then walk for months before they even reached Texas. Can you imagine that? They packed what they could: food, clothing, tools, all the essentials, and stepped onto ships that would become their homes for months. And here's where things get really tough. Storms, the kind that could toss a ship like a toy in a bathtub. The ships were crowded. They had no personal space. They were shoulder to shoulder with strangers and barely enough room to lie down. And the worst part? There were no bathrooms. People had to use buckets. And if you weren't careful, high winds could blow everything right back at you. The ship stank of sweat, fish, and, well, you know, poo. Sickness spread fast. Sicknesses like dysentery, scurvy, and smallpox took over the ship. With no real doctors and little fresh food, some people didn't survive. And if that wasn't bad enough, there were pirates.
Arr, shiver me timbers.
Yes, real live pirates roamed the seas, attacking ships like the ones carrying the Canary Islanders. They weren't looking for treasure maps or parrots. They wanted gold, supplies, and sometimes even the people who were aboard the ships. So, to stay safe, Spanish ships often traveled together, guarded by warships. But fear, that was always on board. And after all that danger and a year-long journey, the survivors finally reached San Antonio in 1731. So what happened next? Did they get comfy and sleep in a comfy bed, dine into the best restaurants, and watch Netflix? Of course not. Not only did those things not exist, they simply didn't have time to rest. They were on a mission. They built homes, planted crops, and founded the first organized town in Texas, Villa de San Antonio de Béxar. By 1738, just 7 years later, they completed San Fernando Cathedral, which still stands today. Now, this wasn't just a church. It was the heart of their community, a symbol that they had made it. They had survived. But they didn't stop there. These families created the first government in Texas. They made laws, helped run the town, and supported the Spanish soldiers and missions nearby. Their hard work helped San Antonio make a stronghold for Spain, and the city grew because of them. Their descendants, some of them are still in Texas today, part of the rich history of our state. But let's not forget the land they settled wasn't exactly empty when they landed there. Before the Canary Islanders traveled, Spain had already learned something from its early expeditions, called entradas. If they wanted to keep Texas, of course they had to build towns. But in doing so, they changed the lives of everyone who lived there. So before we end this story, there's something really important we need to talk about. While the Canary Islanders were building new homes and starting new lives in San Antonio, they were not the first people to live on this land. Native American tribes, like the Coahuiltecans, and I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. These Native American tribes had lived on this area for thousands of years. They hunted, fished, and had their own traditions, their own languages, and their own ways of life. So when the Spanish arrived, everything changed for them too. The Spanish missions like Mission San Juan, Mission Concepcion, they were all built to convert Native Americans to Catholicism and teach them to live like the Europeans did. Many Native Americans were told they had to assimilate, which means to give up their old ways and follow the rules of the Spanish colonizers. They had to change how they dressed, how they prayed, even how they worked. They were taught new languages, and sometimes they were forced to stay in the missions. Some Native Americans joined the missions willingly, hoping for protection or food during hard times. But for many others, this was the beginning of a time of loss. Loss of land, loss of culture, and loss of freedom. And while the story of the Canary Islanders is one of courage and survival, it's also a part of a bigger story about how different people came together, sometimes clashed, in the land that would one day become Texas. So the next time you walk past San Fernando Cathedral or hear about San Antonio, remember the families who crossed oceans, faced pirates, and built something new. They weren't just settlers. They were survivors, they were builders, they were leaders. That's all for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in next week, where we'll uncover more Texas mysteries and legends. Stay curious.